Hello, everyone. You
Okay,
thought we were going to.
the stream is starting, but okay, hey everyone who is watching. We have one viewer. Welcome, welcome. This is our stream on All About Love, but I just saw the Batman movie last night, and we're gonna just talk about that
Batman.
just a little bit. It's not a Batman stream, it's still a Bell Hooks stream, but we're gonna talk a little bit about Batman because I just saw it and I have some thoughts. So, yeah, Tom, go
Hello.
ahead.
Hi. Uh, well, I before getting into the text of the film, before getting into the issues I believe both Lua and I have with the main concept of a Batman as a figure, as a story, as a character, all that stuff. I would just like to say that it felt phenomenally good to see a film. And by that I mean a piece of film that had a lot of thought and care and texture and like a feel, a voice to it, a character to it. Because the most recent film I watched before watching the Batman was Spider-Man No Way Home, which was, to me at least, the most anodyne, the most gray, textureless kind of stuff that I'd seen in a long time. And it was just really good to uh, like feel that the place I was seeing, the characters I was seeing were real, and to be swept up in that. Whether or not like the feelings I was feeling about the characters were positive or negative, I felt I was feeling something. I was invested in it. And if that comes across a little bit Martin Scorsese-ish, saying, "Oh, Marvel films are not cinema," that's because it's I am a little bit of that mentality. I am a bit of a snob in that respect. I'm I can't. In terms of the text of the film, uh, I think that just Batman as a concept is just always going to be fundamentally problematic because he is a very rich white man who, like most very rich white men in the world today, could end like 99% of the problems on the planet by literally just, I'm going to give away, not even, he wouldn't even need to give all of his money away, like most of it, half of it even, and could do some real good. And I will never dispute that. That is a main problem with the character of Batman. Um, and I don't like by design, it's very hard to fix that because they took some of the interesting things about Zorro and other characters like Zorro, um, but stripped it of a lot of the political content to it. So it's just very much Batman punches the problems a lot of the time. Um, but depending on who's writing, because it is a comic book, you'll get people who like, oh no, there's more
Hey,
people. Oh no.
Jeremy. We're talking a little bit about Batman really briefly, probably for like 3 more minutes, and then we're gonna hop in to the actual book club. But I
Yeah,
saw it last night, so like we will probably talk about it afterwards as well because
yeah, I was going on already too long. Uh, I just, yeah, I have a lot of thoughts about it too. But I did enjoy it. I enjoyed it as a film, uh, mostly. Uh, I don't aspire to Batman. I don't consider Batman like a role model. Um, and I definitely agree with the position that he could help more without dressing up. Um, that said, uh, it is a pretty. It's I thought it was a very good noir film. in so much as none of the characters are particularly uh redeemable. Everything is terrible, and even just a little bit of an attempt to have hope and make things better is something. Um, but that I think that's more to do with like the tone that they were going for, and it is inevitably there's going to be some propaganda, because like Batman's best friend is basically is well, he's not his best friend, but he's like his main colleague,
Yeah.
is a cop, and instead of saying you're a good man, Charlie Brown, no, you're a good man, Gordon, he said you're a good cop. And that, I think that for me, as well as the mayor saying we need to rebuild faith in our institutions, and I was like, I took that scene as a little bit of with a bit of irony. I don't necessarily think they were being like, yes, this is the takeaway of this film. You should still have faith in you. I felt like it was like saying, oh wow, even after all that, hmm, interesting. But yeah, the good cop thing was too much for me. I was like, really? Have you learned nothing? It's like he, it's like 99% of the police force has been proven to be corrupt. You work with the one guy who's not corrupt. He's not a good cop because by definition, cop apparently is sellout. It is bribable mafia collaborator. So the one guy you that is nice is a good man, in spite of being a police officer, not because it's in spite of that. But
I think by definition, also, he's not a good cop if he's the only one who's not corrupt and all the rest are, and he has no idea that that's happening,
yeah, that was
right?
funny.
Like, how is that even possible? How is that possible? Oh,
It
I've
was
been on the
so.
force 25 years. How did you not notice that, like,
But wait, the
everyone in
DA?
right? Oh
It
my
was so
god, yeah,
funny.
right.
It was so funny because he just like the impression I got was, yeah, maybe not necessarily that he wasn't aware, but that he was just kind of very tired. Like when Batman told him, yeah, the DA is corrupt, he did like this, like, was like, Gordon is so tired. It's like, well, why are you still there? Why not leave? Every single one of your colleagues is corrupt, and it's like, Jesus, not another one. Like, yeah, maybe you should do something about that. It's getting to be a bit ridiculous now. Um, I did
Jeremy,
like
have you
I.
seen the Batman? Okay. Okay, well,
No, I haven't.
we'll get to All About Love and then we'll save the rest of the conversation probably for the end because I definitely want to talk about it more, but it seems like it's a little bit more in depth. Um, but yeah, okay. Well, hey everyone. Welcome to our All About Love book club. I'm going to stream my notes so people can take a peek at that. And okay, so this is chapter 6. Um Love ethic. A love ethic presupposes that everyone has the right to be free. Oh, so this, sorry, I'm just reading my notes. So yeah, this talks about like a love ethic. So yeah, she defines this as a love ethic that presupposes that everyone has the right to be free, to live fully and well. Um, living by a love ethic, we learn to value loyalty and to commitment to sustained bonds over material advancement. While careers and making money remain important agendas, they never take precedence over valuing and nurturing human life and well-being. Yeah, any thoughts? Oh, hey Ben. Any thoughts on a love ethic and what that is and even what that means to you. Okay. Well, I kind of like that definition. Just like it's very general, but I think it's just kind of just like, yeah, everyone has the right to be free to live fully and well. And I like how general it is because it kind of allows people to define what that means for them. Because to me, when I think about that, like when I immediately like think of sovereignty, and I think of like all the different kinds of people there are and how that looks like so many different things, but allowing people to have that and to really explore that in all these different ways, I think is really important. Yeah, anything else on that before we move on? Okay. So she talks about a new age writing affirms love ethic, but it often reaches those with class only those with class privilege. So I'm really glad that she pointed that out. Yeah, I'm just glad that she like kind of like criticizes issues around this, but also talks about things that she likes about it. Um, so this is something that I found really interesting in this chapter. Bell Hooks talks about white people being able to challenge racism, and she says these individuals were exceptions. I agree, but I then talked about the necessity of changing our thinking so that we see ourselves as being like the one who does change rather than among who refuse to change. And so I think she really ties in like living life with a love ethic of not having fear. And I think it kind of reminds me of how we talk about like doomers, where it's like this kind of hopelessness. And she's saying like it sounds like she's saying like don't have this hopelessness, like be able to look at the world. Oh my gosh, wait a minute. Oh my gosh. I just remembered this Wenzelberry quote. But I can't quite remember it. Hold on. Oh my goodness. She brings up Wenzelberry, who I like love. Um oh my gosh, this is like one of my favorite Wenzelberry quotes and I totally forgot it, but it's like being able to look at the world and being able to look at the world and even though it's broken, still have hope in spite of all of that. Um but the way Wenzelberry says it is so much more beautiful. Um but yeah, I think that's really what she's getting at. Being able to have hope in the world, being able to be like, well, we are the change, we can be the change. And I thought it was a really interesting example about white people specifically, especially as a black person, where it's like for me, I'm like constantly like they're just like I'm like constantly like ebbing and flowing, being like, okay, like we just gotta talk about racism and we can do this, we can understand it, and then I'm like, this is not going to happen. Like this is a massacre where people will never understand this and there's like nothing we can do. So like I ebb between like hope and despair. So to me, this is really nice to think, to kind of focus on the people that do change and to cultivate this hope, because there are people who change and want to listen, and focusing on that to keep you going, I think is important. But yeah, any thoughts on those ideas? Any at all?
I kind of like the way Bell Hooks is like she has part of her style I think is to like introduce an idea that most people can agree on and that seems like who's going to disagree with this, and then to go, okay, so if you agree with that, like surely this kind of more difficult underlying idea is also true. And I don't know, it's kind of like a nice, it's like a the quiet shit disturber um approach, which I appreciate. So I like that. I like that she doesn't just let people get away with the, I don't know if it's like calling out hopelessness necessarily, but definitely like calling out the kind of complacency that can come to some people. And I think, yeah, for people like me, it's definitely not enough to go, oh, there's just too much to do and society is just too fucked and blah blah blah. Like that's not much good for me to espouse personally. And it's also like it's not good for me to buy into that and spread it when I have options beyond that, you know. And I just appreciate her style in the kind of, she kind of calls you in and then she's like, okay, now that you're here, you know we have to do this, right? Kind of like
Mm-hmm.
the stealth tactic thing. I like it. She does it a little bit in the next part about like domestic violence too.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm wondering, maybe let's just like read this example. It's on page 90.
Do you want me to read it?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so here's another example. If you go door to door in our nation and talk to citizens about domestic violence, almost everyone will insist that they do not support male violence against women, that they believe it to be morally and ethically wrong. However, if you then explain that we can only end male violence against women by challenging patriarchy, and that means no longer accepting the notion that men should have more rights and privileges than women because of biological difference, or that men should have the power and rule over women, that's where the agreement stops. I think this is the crux. There's a gap between the values they claim to hold and their willingness to do the work of connecting thought and action, theory and practice to realize these values and thus create a more just society.
Yeah.
Yes. Uh, I like I was reading this chapter earlier today. I think I only have like a very, it's gonna sound almost like it's gonna be very superficial because it is superficial. My superficial criticism of the book so far as I've read it um, is that there's always lots of points of truth in every chapter. Like this one, for example, that like you said, that there's an invitation to consider something. It's like here, this is the common ground. This is the thing we agree on, and then it leads to the kind of the next step. Um, but around those, there's a lot of sections of this book that I just don't understand. In the sense that they feel very vague, or and I know that one of her points specifically was to say, you know, we need to treat love not as this nebulous, mysterious thing. We need to kind of try and understand it, think about it, and analyze it. But there's a lot of parts of this book where I'm just very confused, and I'm like struggling to like, what are you saying? I don't understand. Like, and it might just be that it's because I'm not a spiritual person, but especially the parts where she talks about the soul and turning the soul, affirmations of the soul, like that doesn't mean anything to me. I just don't understand what that means. And so I'm kind of I'm left behind there. But in these parts where she's like making examples and she's like crystallizing a problem with a like saying, hey, if A, then there is no reasonable motivation for you not to B, that kind of thing. Like I'm completely on board and I can follow, but there's a lot of bits in between and I'm like, wait, what? I don't I don't understand. But like I said, that I feel that that's more of a stylistic thing. It might be more of just her way of writing. I don't know. But yeah, that's all I have to say. I'm afraid. I don't think it's I it's necessarily shared. But I just wanted to put it out there.
No, I feel the same way. Yeah. Like there's like
Mm.
things are very like there are things that I really love about that she said, like
Mhm.
thing that like Ben just pointed out, and then there's like things also where I'm like, this is really vague and I wish it was more concrete. And yeah, so I have like a similar takeaway.
Yeah, and there was like I think you wrote it down in your notes as well. Like there's the part where she's talking about um people having power as consumers, like saying if we want to see more realistic, more in-depth representations of love in media, uh, then we need to collectively ask for it. Um, and I read that and I was like, yeah, absolutely. That's how a lot of things are done. It's definitely within media. It's like it's the argument that very often it's like if you want people to stop making bad movies, stop going to see them. You can apply it to the reverse. Like if you want to see more positive representations, more uh, meaningful ones, more realistic ones, then you need to support them so that they can keep being made. But there was also a part, and I might have misread it. I might have again, it might be one of those points where I didn't understand it so well, but it felt like she was saying the reason why the media or the people in the media have this ethic of dominance is because they is simply just because they don't understand love. And I felt like while that might be true, I felt like there is another reason, and it's that they want to impose dominance. Like if they are using the ethic of dominance, it's because they want to people to kind of accept the status quo. And I don't know if that was implied, but from the bit that stuck in my memory, it felt as if it was saying, "Yeah, well, they just don't know it, and if we maybe show them what love is, then maybe they'll stop." I don't know. I might have misinterpreted, but it felt like there was something being omitted. Like I definitely agree. People like uh, Rupert Murdoch. I don't think they know what love is. um, Almost certainly. The the Daily Mail doesn't like all of the like big media stuff. Like yeah, sure, that's. But I also think they have a vested interest in maintaining an ethic of dominance rather than an ethic of love. I don't think it's just from ignorance. I think it's also from volition. It's like, but I don't know. I would be curious to know what you guys think.
I think the book could have um, taken a stronger stance on just how people benefit from these in the first place. Because even with the patriarchy example, um, the issue is they have this ethic, but like a lot of people are already benefiting from that. And if someone is benefiting from something, it takes away a lot of the desire to oppose it in any meaningful way. And this includes a lot of women when it comes to patriarchy, because lots of people benefit from it as they're being harmed from it too. And I think the same thing applies to the movies. We can spend our money however we like, but the reality is they are still benefiting it from putting certain narratives in film in more than one way beyond individual consumption and what people are wanting to.
Um, I think there's kind of two branches of criticism that we're exploring here, and I think the first one is about kind of more concretely the positions that Bell Hooks takes, like the actual things that she says, such as exercise, your consumer power to maybe change the landscape of media, or America is a very democratic country, you know, like things like this that we could definitely take issue with. And then Tom, I think what you were talking about at first was more of a like a different branch of criticism, which is that there's certain kind of esoteric or spiritual or mystical aspects, which is not really much of a concrete position, but it's yeah, that's like maybe a bit harder to criticize, but it's also harder to access and take part in. So I want to kind of respond to both of those. Uh, in terms of the spiritual stuff, like I do think this is a very personal book, and I think this is a book that Bell Hooks wrote feeling kind of like in a void or a vacuum of equivalent writing. Like a lot of the opening of the book, she's like, nobody really seems to be trying to do something like this, so I'm just gonna do it. And so I think there's a fair bit of like the process of writing the book in that context where she's like, I'm gonna have to write some really personal stuff that makes sense to me. Maybe it'll make sense to you, maybe not, but like I'm kind of out here alone right now in some ways. And I'm not saying Bell Hooks is like totally hyper marginalized and totally left out in the cold by the world. Uh, but in terms of this particular work within the context of other scholarly work, I think she does feel like pretty alone, and maybe that gives her license to um, you know, explore her spiritual side or try to express esoteric ideas that are not going to be for everyone. I definitely was into I'm more personally connected to those ideas, but towards the end of the book I was kind of like, can't really go there with you, Bell Hooks. I can't quite, you know, you're going deep here, that's cool, I can't quite get there. But that's my take on the kind of first branch of criticism. In terms of the second branch, I think, you know, we can talk about how it was published 20 plus years ago. That feels like a bit of a cop out to me. I think Jeremy, I remember you bringing up like her pretty apparent class privilege and stuff, like at the point that she's writing the book. I think that definitely plays into, you know, a lot of her positions that are definitely open for criticism. There's definitely like kind of a liberally vibe ish in there. Like the passage right after is talking about, well, the US is one of the most democratic countries in the world, and there's a lot to be said about that. I think there's, yeah, she takes concrete positions that are open to criticism, for sure, and she takes esoteric routes that are not going to be accessible to everyone or useful to everyone. That's also for sure. Uh, I'm still a Bell Hooks apologist. I still think there's a fair bit of value in the book, uh, but yeah, that's all I wanted to say, I guess, for now.
No, I get that. Like context is very important. Like especially for like what you were saying. Like it does demonstrably feel like a personal book. I think it is literally, like I said, it's literally just an aesthetic thing. It's like and also it's slightly less accessible to me. It's like there are those moments are like, okay, this is your moment. I'm kind of here. I'm listening. I don't fully understand, but I'm okay with it. It's fine. But yeah. I thought the thing about the US being the most democrat, I thought that was sarcasm. I didn't realize it was I read that as sarcastic. I didn't realize that was in earnest.
It's possible. I don't know. Maybe you're right.
I hope it was sarcasm. It took me out of the book for a moment.
I thought it was
I was
may
very
not be.
sincere, and
It
I
may
was
not
like,
be.
yes, it's sadly many of our nation's citizens are proud to live in one of the most democratic countries in the world. Oh, you know what? She's saying are many of our nation's citizens. So
Oh,
yeah,
like from their perspective, it's the most.
that yeah, I think that actually is probably it. Sadly, many of our
Okay.
nation's citizens are proud to live in one of the most democratic countries in the world, even as they are afraid to stand up for individuals who live under repressive and fascist governments. It's still kind of unclear to me when I read it. It could be being like they
You could read it a
believe
lot of
that.
ways, yeah.
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 Like
But
maybe
yeah.
there's like there's like an implicit, many people are proud to live in what they believe to be. Like there might be like you could read an implicit like this is what they believe, but then they don't follow up on that,
Mm-hmm.
etc., etc. Like
Yeah, and I think
I,
that is
I
the
I
main
read it
point
like
she's
that.
getting at. Oh,
It
yeah.
definitely took me out of it for a second because what's she talking about? This is an oppressive and fascist regime.
Yeah, and people
Yeah.
like literally live in oppressive fascist regimes because the government, because the U.S. government's like, oh, we want to overthrow your government right now, so we're gonna like kind of just come in there and do that, and then it's like it kills like hundreds of thousands of people. It's like that happens like time and time again. So yeah, I think that was worded a little bit weirdly, but I do want to like acknowledge that she might have meant that's what other people think that America is, more so than maybe that's what Bell Hook's views are. But yeah, it's a little unclear. Um, yeah, let's kind of. I guess we'll get back on track to just talking about the rest of the chapter. I definitely do. Yeah, I definitely am agreeing with some of these criticisms, and also, finding what she has to say valuable in many ways as well. Um, yeah, so I want to get back to this, to like the idea of like having hope when, and so I want to actually try to read maybe a quote around that. Um oh, I think I put the wrong page number for this. Oh, wait, here it is. Okay, so talking to a university audience recently, I expressed my faith in the power of white people to speak out against racism, challenging and changing prejudice, emphatically stating that I definitely believe we can all change our minds and our actions. I stressed that this faith was not rooted in a utopian longing, but rather that I believe this because of our nation's history of many individuals who have offered their lives in the service of justice and freedom. When challenged by folks who claimed that these individuals were exceptions, I agreed, but I then talked about the necessity of changing our thinking so that we see ourselves as being like the ones who does change, rather than among who refuse. Wait, then among who refuse to change. What made these individuals exceptional was not that they were any smarter or kinder than their neighbors, but they were willing to live the truth of their values. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a few typos in there.
Wow, actual typo. Damn.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was reading that. I was like, I think that is maybe an extra word. But yeah, I think I've been like wondering about this, especially about like with white people and tackling racism. Like, I think with white people, you can't convince them to care about racism through caring about their values. Like, I think it comes to having to know people who are not white, um, and like humanizing like non-white people, and like being friends, like loving cultures that are not necessarily white, and actually like having a love for those people. Because I think there's like kind of this like rational approach that maybe Bell Hooks is trying to take, where it's like, well, if you have this value, then you should value this. um but in my experience with people, that just doesn't happen because of cognitive dissonance. So like people will have like a belief that maybe contradicts another belief, and because it's so uncomfortable thinking of ourselves as being irrational, we'll actually just rationalize whatever contradictory beliefs we have. And it's like, for me, that's just kind of like a fact of life. Like I'm not really like, people do that, and you can't always be logically consistent, and I've kind of just made peace with that. But I think like what it comes down to is not like trying to rationalize people into not being racist, but I think it comes down to actually knowing non-white people, and also particularly like knowing black people, like knowing the most like disenfranchised people, and knowing indigenous people, and just really humanizing all these disenfranchised people, and being like, oh my gosh, these people have a massive struggle in this country, and that sucks because they're my friends, and I think it has to be something like that. Otherwise, I just don't see white people caring. But yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on that particular thing. Does anyone have any thoughts on that? I know I'm kind of like focusing on racism specifically.
I mean, I think there's this historical issue with, say, like for example, white abolitionists, right? A lot of what white abolitionism was, as an example, like my understanding of a lot of white abolitionism is like, okay, we have this ideological framework that we're then going to use to superimpose across this whole system as being evil, and it's like, well, they ended up in a good place, but they still didn't humanize the experiences of enslaved peoples. And I think that's like when you have a bunch of people, say, in New England, and they're very religious, and on religious principle they're opposed to something. I don't think that principle is actually enough. Like, I think it's the relationships, and like I think the the effect of like relational structures is what undermines things like racism. That's what I think, and I think putting forth that like, oh well, you know, if you can accept this belief, this ethical structure, then you can go to this next ethical structure, and that just makes sense. Well, okay, that makes sense, but I think it's still like there's the opportunity there to stay incredibly disconnected from the potential continued harm that isn't elicited through, you know, this progression across ethical structure. You know, I think it takes relationships. So just saying that people need to people need to know people who aren't like them, and white people need to know uh, need to be in relationship with. I think need to be in relationship with. Um, I guess just other people to not be racist. You know, I think, or to deconstruct their racism.
I agree. I also like the problem with reasoning somebody out of racism, so to speak, like explaining to them through like saying rationalize through rational process, is that at this point we have so much stuff, so much baggage, so many concepts that were invented specifically to other and to perpetuate otherness and to reinforce otherness, that it does feel like the other person is just going to end up lost, because like you say, okay, well, you believe this is based on this problem, which is false, and I can explain that it's false because this problem, and it's like it's this almost never-ending chain of bullshit. And I could like it is like you said, like if you just know the person, if you get to know the person, it's like almost certainly gonna dismantle that stuff quicker than just like going through it in a purely like rational theory based way. I like I think it goes the other way around. Like you meet the person, you get to know the person, and then you start seeing the cracks in everything. It's like, wait, all of these preconceptions that are surrounding me in my society, I don't like, I can see them for what they are because I have this relationship with this person. And yeah, it, I think it's like it's probably personally I think it's a combination of the two, but definitely like the relationship has to come first. Otherwise, you're stuck with like trying to de. It's gonna sound weird, deprogram like centuries and centuries of stuff, of made up stuff, of these made up divisions, and it's like, especially if it comes from a purely emotional place, like if if that racism has been fed through things like anger and fear, like trying to deconstruct the concept of race to someone who feels that way, I honestly, I think it's just going to make them more angry. But no, yeah. So that was a very long-winded way of saying I agree. Spot on at 100%.
It kind of takes me back to a conversation I was having with a friend a while ago, on the concept of ableism, not race, but on if it's a good idea or not to do what some of us do, which is kind of try to threaten the abled into caring about disability issues through the reality that a lot of people are very likely to become disabled at some point in their life. Now, my friend's thought was we shouldn't do that because we should find a way to get the able people to care about us as people instead of as something they might become. And I was a little bit more cynical on it and wondering if that's possible for them to care about something that won't directly affect them. So I was just being taken back to that, that didn't come to a conclusion because it's complex.
Well, I think this makes me think of like going back to being in community with people, because like just talking with you, Corin, I'm like, oh wow, there's like all these, there's just like all this BS that you have to put up with, and it's really messed up. And when you like when you talk about it, I really care because I care about you, and I honestly think I kind of think that's I think that's why being in community with people is so important, because it's like you don't want someone in your community to have to go through a hard time. It's hard to, I mean, no one wants anyone to go through a hard time, but it's hard to like really humanize other people without actually knowing them. And so I think that's been what I've been thinking about a lot these past maybe like year or so. I think that like the importance of community and the importance of like being able to tell humanizing stories where you're like, oh wow, like um like when you were telling me about the Judge Rottenberg Center, like I was like, oh my gosh, like that is so horrible. And it's like you hear that story and you're like, that needs to stop. Like it ignites something in me. And so I think it's like a matter of, to me, I think it comes down to humanizing people and like what humanizes people. There's humanizing people can be telling stories, because humans don't do well with facts. We do really well with narratives. And humanizing people is also just getting to know people, being in community with people. And so I think it's really important to do that, because I think without that humanizing element of it, and being close to people, really empathizing with their story, without being able to do that, then it's kind of just like, oh, like we should care about this, but like you don't really know what to do, you don't really know what's going on, and then you feel guilty for not doing enough. But when you're in community with people, it's different because you care on a more personal level, which is kind of what we all need to get to. Um, for I think for all these issues that we care about as leftists, like I think we have to get on that level where we're like really caring about each other, or as Audre Lorde says, like when I see you, I see this the same struggle, and so I think we need to get to that where we see the same struggle in each other.
Um, I do want to add that I think maybe I framed Bell Hooks's intentions incorrectly, because in the talk where she's talking about racism and kind of taking people from one logical point to another, I would say her ambitions there are pretty narrow in scope. Like she's addressing a university crowd who came to see a Bell Hooks talk. Like I don't think she's trying to deploy that strategy on the entire white population. I think it's more specific to well-meaning liberal type white people who you know want to hear Bell Hooks speak, so they must have at least some kind of connection to the topic of race and racism. And she does also, like a couple pages later, literally, there's a Cornel West quote that put in, or sorry, Lua put in her notes that says, "Nihilism is not overcome by arguments or analyses; it is tamed by love and care." So, yeah, I hope I didn't like misrepresent Bell Hooks as like I will beat racism with facts and reason, because that's definitely, I don't think that's really her approach. I think that
Yeah.
the whole kind of logical structure, if this then this, was like a deployed in a really specific and narrow circumstance, which I think can be effective. But definitely, I also agree 100% that uh, getting through systemic barriers that also prevent relationships between, you know, relatively able-bodied people, white people, uh, like me, has been, getting to know people who are racialized, who are disabled, who are both, has been there's nothing that can really replace that kind of experience in terms of understanding the total lack of any kind of true logic, anything in the way that the society is organized,
Yeah, that
apart
is
from the logic of like wealth accumulation for some arbitrary group.
yeah, that is a really good point to make, and I really appreciate you like kind of always like bringing it back to Bell Hook's intentions, because yeah, she does bring up, that really great quote from Cornel West. Yeah, she talks about society must be organized in such a way that uh, this is not Cornel West, but this is a different quote from a person called Fromm. But Fromm says society must be organized in such a way that man's social loving nature is not separated from his social existence, but becomes one with it. Um, she really stresses that. Yeah, and I'm all these things like I'm just like in heavy agreement with. She talks about
Also,
how
just wanted to. Oh,
yeah.
sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I just also wanted to add that with what Ben was saying about this being like specific to a college campus, that I feel like that's a really important point, because this is like, the first time that a lot of not just white people but like people in general have as a chance to come into community with people that they wouldn't usually get to come in community with, and to like actually develop an idea of this is what I want my life to be in the future, and where you have that like tug where it's like you can decide to intellectualize things. There are a whole bunch of people that are going to be like pressuring you to, or like not even pressuring, but like just the structure of the system is set up such that like you can intellectualize your way into believing anything, and then the actual results of your life are like completely different from what your beliefs are. Or you can like decide to be like, here's this like example of a white person who developed community with and loves black people, and like to decide to orient your entire life around achieving that goal, like making friends on campus and everything like that. So yeah, that's the thing that I really took away from that part.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, like one of the things that so I read through the whole book, and honestly, just as a whole, I was disappointed in all these ways, right? And then I started watching panel discussions with bell hooks and um, other people in the space, and I was like, oh, like there. I feel like the book is intended for this like specific cross section of people, right? I think we've talked about this stuff before, but uh, like a specific cross section of people who maybe need to hear like the first steps first, and who need like to be injected with a little bit of hope on the topic. And then looking at like these other spaces where I'm just like, that's what I wanted in this book, is like I'm finding in these like panel discussions and whatnot. And it yeah it I think I often go back to this, like um why is bell hooks talking about Alice Walker and other new age writers and people who I grew up with, and I'm like, that's all like vague, hopeful, feel good and make the world good kind of stuff. um but I think there's really a push in this book toward accessibility to a huge audience, and like a college campus audience. So yeah, it's good to be reminded of that. For me, it's definitely good.
I do want to point out, I do think this is accessible to a college campus, but I also like interviewed this person called Scott Ainsley, and he's this blues musician. And I met him when he came to my school for this thing that we have called General Recital, where we'll have musicians come in and just like they'll talk about their career as a musician, and it's supposed to help us like get when we get in the music industry or things like that, or like figure out a music career. Anyways, this person like would play music, and then he'd be like, yeah, this song was written by like so and so, they've experienced like, he would just tell the story of the racism that they experienced. And it was just like, it was like really just profound. And then he would talk about like the realities of racism that still happen today. And he's white, but I was like just shocked because I was like looking around and I was like, oh my gosh, like this person's just straight up talking about racism and he's not mincing any words. And I was like, are the white people gonna be okay? I was like looking around and I was like, this is like, there is it, like, I was like, he can't be saying it in this way, it's gonna upset people. But at the end, everyone like was like walked up to him and was just like, that was so amazing. And yeah, it was just really profound. I was like, we're having a moment where we're like talking about racism in a way that is like just so poignant. And also everyone in the room was like loved it. I mean, maybe there were people who didn't like it, but that didn't seem to be the case. Like it was probably like everyone's favorite general recital that year, or one of them, you know? And it was like this person talking about racism and playing the blues. And so yeah, I kind of want to just like throw that out there. Like, I think there's a way where you can just kind of just really like be poignant because you're expressing your humanity and like communicate with people. But yeah, I'm not saying that Bell Hooks isn't doing that, but I think in like the terms of like college campuses, I think I really loved how he was able to pull that off. And I hope that's not too off topic, but yeah. Any other thoughts on this before we just kind of look at the rest of the chapter and wrap it up?
I appreciate you sharing that story. Thank you.
Yeah.
As someone who makes music and loves the blues and is white, so thanks.
Yeah. Yeah, he's so cool. I'll post some of his music in the Discord. Like, he's seriously like, if you ever just like meet people who are just like so wholesome that like you want to be wholesome and it's contagious, like he is that person. And I don't know if I'll ever be that person because I'm very petty. Like, but he's just like so contagious and it's just like really inspiring.
Just gonna put this out there because you didn't mention it. Lua's interview is one of her YouTube videos, so if you haven't seen it, watch it.
Yeah, I'll post that interview. Like, I literally like thought I was gonna cry at the end because this person's just so kind and just like loving.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, this is a quote that I really liked. This is on page 95. She says, "We see movies in which people are represented as being in love, who never talk with one another, who fall into bed without ever discussion." Oh, sorry, this is full of typos. Without ever discussing their ideas, their sexual needs, their likes and dislikes. Indeed, the message received from the mass media is that knowledge makes love less compelling, that it is ignorance that... Oh, sorry, this is so many typos. This ignorance that lives?
That gives.
That gives. I'm sorry. That gives love its erotic and transgressive edge. Sorry, I just like type this like while looking at the book, and then there's all these typos. Yeah. So I just really liked this quote because this is something that really bothers me in movies. Like, just the way, even the Batman movie. Okay, this is on topic. This is not off topic. So like literally with Catwoman, he's like a dick to her. Like literally, he's like, oh, like you didn't tell me I had a relationship with this person. And I'm like literally, like, I'm like, she doesn't owe you shit. But anyways, that's not the point. The point is like, they just like have like some sexual tension and they end up like, you know, having a thing. And I'm like, but these people don't know shit about each other. These people don't talk. And anyways, without going too much off topic, I think so many movies like have that where like just like the love, there's a boy, there's a girl. It's like the Avril Lavigne song where it's like, he was a boy, she was a girl,
She was a girl.
And it's like, and that's that. I'm like, can we get a little bit more? Can we see why these people love and care about each other? Can we see them talking? Can we see their relationship? And there was this video by this YouTuber called Rowan Ellis. She talks about how like people love like queer fandom, because it's not as obvious. Like you have to like see, because it's harder to fit in just like the typical heteronormative trope, and so you have to be like, oh yeah, this is what got them into each other. And I feel like those relationships are actually like developed a little bit more than in these typical hetero relationships. But yeah, I would love to see more of that. And I think there's this kind of like assumption, honestly, I think there's like this like patriarchal assumption where it's like, oh, there's a girl, she said hi, we're gonna get together, which is like something that I like just deal with like on a regular basis. I know other women deal with too, where it's like literally I'll just say hi to someone or talk with someone and they think that it's flirting, but I'm actually just saying hi. And then there's like, well, the issue isn't if people are wondering if I'm flirting or not. I think there's a lot of times I run into the issue where people kind of start to just like assume that maybe like we're even dating or things like that without like checking in with me or talking with me. And I know this happens all the time to people. And so like I see that in movies where someone just kind of says hi, they're the couple now, they're like the romantic interest. And the way that this all just perpetuates these like weird problems, where ultimately like I wish we would just communicate more, talk more, get to know each other more, and be able to have like this like in-depth relationship where we can like know each other. And that just doesn't happen in movies. And so yeah, I mean, I'm all in agreement when Bell Hooks talks about like, I want to just see better representation in movies. Can we get that? And I feel like today people have demanded that. So like I think things are shifting, and like I'm glad that I think there's ways where I see improvements, and so that's really great. But I definitely want to see more of that. Any thoughts on that and the mass media portrayal?
I had a thought about a film, but I don't know if it's if I'm gonna risk going off on tangent. But like I'm a sucker for rom-coms. Like I've watched far too many, and most of the time I do fully acknowledge that they're kind of trashy. You know, they're not like, they're like a snack rather than a full meal, if that works as an analogy. It's like, I'm being mildly entertained for a bit. But yeah, most of them definitely fall into that trope, that trap, both trope trap, where it's like, here we have the meet cute, here is the male protagonist, here is the female protagonist. They have met, they have exchanged 2 words. Naturally, love will ensue. And you're like, wait, what? and even more tired is when they're aggressive towards each other. There's animosity, and it's like, that just means that they like each other. It's like, no, it doesn't. Probably means that they shouldn't really be friends either at all. And I don't know if there's other stuff about the film that is problematic. I don't know. To me, it felt very wholesome. But I recently watched Marry Me, which I believe is based on a webcomic, if I read the reviews correctly. It's got Jennifer Lopez and Owen Wilson. Oh wow, in it. But I think that's the first rom-com I've seen where the people act like people and they get to know each other, and they like make an attempt to learn about each other and each other's interests and their passions, and take and act on them. And I was like, huh. And I was not surprised that reviews for it were not very positive, because I thought, of course they're not going to be. People aren't used to this kind of thing in a rom-com. Where's the moment where they have a completely unreasonable argument over nothing? Where's that? That doesn't happen. There's a moment where they get kind of sad, and that's it. So they kind of sad, and they start thinking, oh, maybe it won't work out, and they behave like adults, and they just like. Also, they're the same age. And I was so happy that we didn't have another situation where the guy is like in his 50s or 60s and the film is pairing him up with like a 30-year-old or a 20-year-old woman. They're the same age. And I was like, it took us this long, huh? It took us this long.
Yeah,
But
Hollywood does it a
yeah,
lot. Yeah, I mean, I have similar. I'm a sucker for romance, and my guilty pleasure is just reading romance manga. Like I would read so much of it. It was nuts. And yeah, there was a point where I was like, there was a point where this is when I was like, I think like in middle school, I really didn't like Twilight, and I I at some point I realized it was because I wasn't attracted to the love interest, and that was it. I was like, wait a minute. Literally all this stuff that I'm reading is kind of the same thing as Twilight, but it's just something different. And yeah, I was like, wait a minute. And I was like, wait, but I really like Pride and Prejudice. And I was like, is Pride and Prejudice bad? And I was like, nah, Pride and Prejudice is really good, actually. And I was like, but why is Pride and Prejudice good? And then I like started like really thinking about this stuff, and I was like, dang, like character development and like without making this about Pride and Prejudice, just like there's just like a lot of things where I'm like, I need more from this. Like I want character development. I want something that's like talking about the world that we're in and thinking about that. I can't just like have like this tension. And then I also realized like a lot of stuff is like really abusive. Like there was this one manga that I like loved, and the artwork is beautiful, but literally like this person's like an abusive piece of shit. Like it starts off where he like this like with the romance, like he's like an asshole. He's like a prince or something, and he's just like actually like pushes this person like into a fountain, and then just like laughs at her and leaves, and then she just like has to like get up on her own. I'm like, this is just bullying. This is like fucking mean. But then he ends up falling in love with her because it's like that's the thing where it's like, can you get this person, person to like you? And then at some point I'm like, this is actually abusive, and I'm like, dang, I can't like not saying that people shouldn't enjoy that because it's like not really reality, it's a fantasy. But like I actually couldn't really enjoy that stuff anymore. I was like, oh, ooh, that's like really mean, and I like couldn't do it. I'm not saying that's bad if anyone does, because again, doesn't mean that you're actually gonna like do any of that stuff. But yeah, I just would like to see more representation. Like I think I haven't seen that in romantic. I can't like there's this like manga called Kimi ni Todoke, and sorry, it's like all becoming about manga, but like it's like a really sweet relationship where like it's also like about friendship too. It's like about falling in love romantically, but also like kind of falling in love with your friends, and you see all these relationships develop, and it's so sweet. And it's just like it makes me like appreciate like all these like tiny things in life. And yeah, I just don't get that much. I would love to see romantic relationships really just like be developed, or like even friendships as well. Like I just feel like love is so poorly portrayed in movies. Like part of why I love Lord of the Rings so much is because of Sam and Frodo's friendship or relationship. Like it was just, they just really fucking loved each other. And also like between Merry and Pippin, and like why can't we just get more of that? But anyways, I'm kind of ranting. Are there any more thoughts on this chapter, or anything we missed? Anything else that people want to say as we wrap up?
Oh, so I actually think this observation about, um, people fall in love apparently out of nowhere in movies. I think it's actually like a really transgressive observation that brought a lot of stuff together for me. Her points, like it's definitely first of all related to the opening thesis of the book, where like, why are people so insistent on keeping love this mysterious, unknowable thing? And so it definitely plays into that, like, who knows why these two fell for each other, but they did, and they did. Look at them. They said, "Hi, can I borrow your pen?" And so they're in love. You understand that to the viewer, right? And so it's definitely within that scheme. And it makes me think about how like white cis hetero ableist patriarchal society is like so hyper organized around the principle of like power and the accumulation of power and wealth and the privileging of power in like such a narrow band of humanity, and how everything has to orbit around that kind of band of power. And so we know that like we're human beings. Sometimes you get a crush on someone for a reason you don't understand, and you kind of want to explore that, and maybe something happens. But under the kind of aegis or under the context of, you know, the hyper concentration of power, it has to kind of stay within that weird, uncertain, you know, oh, we don't talk about how we really feel about love. We just feel this little spark, and we're going to gravitate towards each other because that's the way that people. We're not going to examine the nuance because that's society hasn't left room for that. Because examining the nuance in a relationship would require examining the nuance in all relationships, and all this kind of weird way power is accumulated. Like, if you really want to get to know me and get together and know each other and talk about love, like, we're going to eventually have to hit on the fact, okay, this point isn't as clear as I thought it would be, but I had this idea that, like, romantic comedies or a lot of media that is like romantic comedies ends up being organized around the same principles as broader mainstream society, and that is a principle of the hyperaccumulation of power. And that principle doesn't actually leave room for the kind of things Bell Hooks is asking about, like what else could be. No, it just has to be this. And if you feel some passing attraction to someone, and especially if you're both like, you know, fit some certain beauty standards, then that's all you need, and just stick to that, and that's going to be the basis of your relationship. And there's no room for like, what else could this be outside of this? And okay, I think I've made my point now. But yeah, I like this observation. I feel like it links to kind of her original thesis, which I thought was super interesting. And it also, I think, does have like a pretty powerful societal critique tucked in there.
Yeah, I really loved that critique. Anything else before we end for the day?
Yeah, this might also be somewhat of a not very clear point, but just listening to you, Ben, and you know everyone, I was thinking about for my unit that I had that I just finished up with my class. We had to, you know, we were fighting amongst ourselves as teachers. Do we want to teach 1984 or Pride and Prejudice? Those were the two options. So, Lua, when you said that,
Pride and Prejudice. Let's go. Sorry.
I know, right? And I really wanted to teach Pride and Prejudice. I haven't actually read the book, but I saw the movie. And I had.
Wait, was it the one with Keira Knightley in it?
Yeah.
I fucking love that movie.
And I don't like 1984 because I feel like it has a lot to do with what y'all are talking about with the way that power is arranged in society. It's like, you know, you have this main character and he like grips on to this one girl that he decides to love, like just honestly because there aren't any other options. And they don't really like, you know, dive into why they love each other or what they should do for each other. They just get like, you know, put in hard circumstances and they have to fight their way out of it, like just for the love for the sake of it. And it's like Pride and Prejudice, it's like, you know, that's not like my favorite movie or anything, but I really do like the way that they interact with each other in such a way that like you can actually examine the why and the how and the coming together of the two characters. And I feel like that's like so important and relatable to students in such a way that, oh, imagine this dystopian government is just like, why are we doing this? So yeah, just wanted to like bring that up, that like
I don't have to imagine.
Right? Oh my gosh, I saw this like tweet or something. It was like, why read a dystopian novel when you could just look around? I was like, dang.
Exactly.
Yeah, 1984 is like one of my least favorite dystopian novels. I like much prefer Brave New Worlds because like everyone in that future, there's like one character who's like, yeah, this is pretty fucked up, and then like people are like, oh, but like not that they chose this, but like they're not as disturbed about everything. They're not disturbed at all. And I think the things that like worry me are like about surveillance. Like the thing with like Edward Snowden, where like he literally was like, yeah, the government's like listening into your calls. They are like watching you, and it's like really fucked up and unethical. And then people learn that, and they're like, yeah, whatever. And it's like, that's a big deal. Like we should be outraged about that. And that's, I mean, so yeah, that's why I like prefer Brave New World, because it's like things are fucked, but then people are kind of just like, nah. And it kind of helps. I think it might help people wake up a little bit more reading that. And then 1984 is just like always, like anytime anyone talks about socialism, they're like, ugh, this is 1984. Or like you're just trying to oppress everyone, and you're like literally talking about like healthcare or something, and it's just like ridiculous. So I have like a little bit of a chip on my shoulder.
Easy to co-opt.
Yeah, I don't think that was like the original intent, but I just have a chip on my shoulder because of the way that people use it so much. That's my thoughts on that. Any other thoughts?
I have many, but they're not. They're off topic. They're going off on this book discussion tangent, and I don't want to take up.
Well, I'm just
not
gonna...
the book that not the book we're discussing. The other books. Damn it.
Well, I'm gonna end this stream for now, and then if people want to hang out and chat still, we should totally do that. Yeah, thank you everyone for watching, and yeah, have a great rest of your day. Okay, so the stream is over, but yeah,